This morning, we're starting off with a section that is one of the major strengths of this department and has been for basically as long as I've been here. It's neuropsychology, AIDS, and aging. And if you were watching your program yesterday, you'll note that there were people who could fit in this, or they could fit in the MRI one, or they could fit in the alcohol or drug section. Indeed, the decision on which section we asked them to offer a lecture on pretty much depended on circumstances at the time. But this is a very flexible and very talented department. And to start off this session on neuropsychology, AIDS, and aging, I must say we have Mr. Aging, although he looks quite young. So Dilip Jeste, who was between Dilip and Dan Sewell, someone who really went out of their way day before yesterday to rescue a woman who was in terrible dire straits and got her into the senior behavioral health program. So Dilip is not only a kind and very generous human being, but he is a distinguished professor of our department. He is the Senior Associate Dean for Healthy Aging and Senior Care, and the Levi Memorial Chair, has the Levi Memorial Chair on Aging, Director of the Stein Institute for Research on Aging, and is the co-director of the IBM-UCSD Center for Artificial Intelligence for Healthy Living. Today, he's going to talk about something that, for those of us senior in the department, is a very important topic, which is psychoneuroplasticity. That's all going on in my brain, I hope, of aging. So, Dilip.
Thank you, Mark, and good morning. It's really a pleasure and a privilege being here, and so thank you for having me give a talk. So I'm a geriatric psychiatrist, and usually, as Mark said, when you think about aging, usually you think about all gloom and doom, everything that goes down with aging: physical health, cognitive function, dementia, depression, disabilities, and so on. Our center focuses on what gets better with aging. So that's what I'll be talking about today. The program in geriatric psychiatry at UCSD started 30-some years ago. And when I look at it in retrospect, I think it could have been a disaster. I came here from the intramural program of NIMH. I had never written a grant before. And I was not even a geriatric psychiatrist. I was going to originally run a schizophrenia program because that's my area of research. But then the VA at San Diego got a grant from the central office for starting a geriatric psychiatry program. And that's why I was asked to begin this program. And the only resource I had here was a young psychiatrist who had just finished her residency. She had no interest in research. She was going to do 1 year of clinical fellowship and then go into private practice. So you can think about this combination. And yet, that psychiatrist, some of you may know, Jackie Harris, turned out to be the best thing actually that can happen to any program. Jackie was not only incredibly smart and kind, but she was also a very wise person. And with her combination of really amazing intellectual and interpersonal skills, she was able to get in more staff, trainees, and faculty who are the best that could be. And really, it's a legacy that continues today. And but for Jackie, I wouldn't be standing here giving this talk. So we started with 2 people. Then slowly it increased to 3 people, then 5 people. And then after obtaining a couple of R01s, we got funded by NIMH for a clinical research center. in late life psychosis. They're the only center in the country specifically focused on late life psychosis, and subsequently we got continuously funded for 20 years until NIMH decided to discontinue those centers. So today, we had two main components of our program. The one is the Geriatric Psychiatry Research Division. The division is broad, but within that, the research portfolio talking about. And that focuses still on late life psychosis, mainly schizophrenia, but also other psychotic disorders. And the other is Stein Institute for Research on Aging. Stein Institute is an ORU, Organized Research Unit. And here, the focus is on healthy aging in the community. So those two are somewhat separate areas of research, although overlapping: schizophrenia in older people and healthy aging in the community. So I want to thank all of my colleagues over the years individually. So these are all the co-authors of the papers I've had the fortune to work with. It really takes a village to have a program. And so the research and research training program, it's multidisciplinary. So we do some research that is population-based, that's the Stein research. Also neuroscience at the individual level, some genetic studies, animal models, and in recent years, technology. And this is, it's not personal bragging, it's really the group bragging for what the colleagues and fellows and the staff have accomplished. So over these years, we have a total of more than $100 million of federal funding, that is NIH and VA. 28 of our trainees got NIH or VA career development grants, and 47 trainees became full-time faculty members, either at UCSD or one of the other universities like Harvard or Stanford. So we're really proud of both the training and the research program, over 600 peer-reviewed publications. And here I'm talking strictly about research. As Mark said, we also have a terrific clinical program in geriatric psychiatry led by Dan Sewell, and also a wonderful clinical training program that is led by Steve Hughey. So the focus for geriatric psychiatry program has been on schizophrenia and aging. So when we started this work, schizophrenia and aging, a number of people said, why are you doing that? It must be so depressing. Schizophrenia is bad and aging is bad, so combination of the two is terrible. It must be so depressing. What are you going to find there? And that's why it was a surprise that actually in some ways it's exactly opposite of what we found. We found a paradox of aging. The physical health declined with age, not a surprise, but very surprisingly, the mental health seemed to improve in the patients. We found that their positive, negative symptoms improved. They became more adherent to medication. Substance use, smoking went down. Their functioning improved. And this was really not something we expected. So we wanted to look at some other conditions like HIV, AIDS, and cancer. And we found the same thing, that people with these serious illnesses, as they became older, their well-being improved. A sizable minority of these patients with serious illnesses had well-being scores in the normal range. And what did this well-being correlate with? It was with levels of resilience, optimism, and wisdom, but not demographic factors like age, sex, income, education, not even illness-related factors like severity of illness or duration of illness. So it looked like there's something happening with age itself that was associated with better mental health. So the question was whether this was something restricted to people with illnesses or it also happened in the general community. So at Stein Institute, we started a study called SAGE, Successful Aging Evaluation. This is a study of more than 1,500 adults in San Diego County from age 21 to 100, so the entire adult lifespan. And this sample is somewhat randomly selected using random digit dialing. In this sample, we looked at both physical health and mental health. Physical health, as you expect, went down with age. But look at the mental health and mental well-being. it went exactly in the opposite direction. So same paradox of aging you are observing here too, that although the physical health is declining, the mental well-being is improving. So there are actually two phases of aging. There is one phase, the physical phase, which is sad, but then there is a happy phase, which is the mental health. So why is it that the mental health improves with aging? So there have been studies, our studies as well as studies done by others, that show that there are several other ability areas that improve with aging. They include satisfaction with life, positivity, that is favoring positive emotions and memory, decisions that require experience, control of emotions, pro-social behaviors like empathy, compassion, altruism, and self-reflection or insight. And if you think about it, people over a certain age here, that as we grow older, actually we get more satisfied with life. We stop worrying about small things and cherish the positive things. We have experience that we have gathered over the years, and we make better decisions because of that. There is much more control over emotions. Think about our teenage years and what we are doing now. Usually we tend to become more empathic, compassionate, and we understand ourselves better, right? So these are the things that constitute wisdom. And empirical research on wisdom has been going on since mid-1970s, started in Max Planck Institute and in Southern California, and it is growing. So these are the components of wisdom. One question is then, is this just a fancy term for some desirable traits, or does it have biological basis? So we looked at the neurobiology of each of the components of wisdom, and we found there is surprising similarity. Most of these components seem to be localized to prefrontal cortex, specifically the dorsolateral, ventromedial, and anterior cingulate, and to limbic striatum, mainly the amygdala. Again, in the brain, there is no fixed localization. I mean, it's a complex computer where all of these systems interact with one another, and yet there is some localization of function. So this was a paper that we published in Archives of General Psychiatry, and then a commentary on wisdom from a neuroscience perspective in JAMA. A couple of years ago, we developed a scale to measure wisdom that's called San Diego Wisdom Scale, thanks to Michael Thomas. So this has 24 items, 4 items for each of the 6 domains that I mentioned, and they are to be rated on a scale from 1 to 5. Examples include, it is important that I understand the reasons for my action. So that's an example of self-reflection or insight. Another is avoid situations where I know my help will be needed. So that's kind of opposite of empathy or compassion. So this is good to excel on psychometric properties. And in 2 years, actually, it has become pretty popular. It has been translated into several languages and being used globally. Very important question, is there a sex difference in wisdom? So we looked at 3 different domains of wisdom: cognitive, reflective, and affective. Cognitive domain, you see there is no difference at all. Reflective, no difference at all. So now comes the tricky part, affective, and you see a big difference here. Women score more than twice as high as men, and the total wisdom score is significantly higher in women than in men. So if you needed any proof, I think we have it now. Women are wiser than men across board. Another area that has been increasingly important in recent years is loneliness. We read headlines about loneliness being a major public health epidemic. In UK, there is a Ministry of Loneliness. So we published a study a few months ago, which was a study of loneliness in 340 San Diego adults. And this study actually got quite a lot of publicity, including CNN. We found that 3 out of 4 adults felt moderate to severely lonely. But the good news is that there was significant inverse correlation between the scores on loneliness and scores on wisdom. This was the most significant correlation for loneliness of all the things we looked at. There are several projects right now we have been doing or we are about to start related to wisdom. We published a paper a few years ago on a mouse model of empathy. This is with Jeff Sanders, who was my T32 fellow, and Mark Mefford, who was his mentor. We are currently looking at fMRI. I've just had this paper that's likely to be accepted by Brain and Behavior. Michael Thomas and Lisa Eiler are among those involved in this. Here we are looking at fMRI during a moral decision-making task. With Brenda Rana and Ellen Lee, we are also looking at candidate gene SNPs associated with wisdom. Then one of the more exciting studies is actually a study with centenarians in Cilento. This study is actually a brainchild of David Brenner. And the co-PI of this is Salvatore Di Soma, a cardiologist from Cilento. The idea is to study 100 people over the age of 90 in Cilento and their 1,000 younger cohabitants. The study already started. We published a couple of papers, and it is looking at a bunch of different things, including loneliness and wisdom. The skills have been translated into Italian, and we will be looking at their associations with the various biomarkers that are being studied here at UCSD. New study we are about to launch next week, thanks to Ryan Van Patten, is the MTurk study. This will be a study of 5,000 people in the country, looking at loneliness, wisdom, and a bunch of other things. And Burton Palmer is leading that. And last but not least is study with IBM. As Mark mentioned, the UCSD got a $10 million 5-year grant from IBM for establishing a center on artificial intelligence for healthy living, which includes healthy aging and microbiome. And Rob Knight and I are co-directors. One of the things, when we talk about artificial intelligence, we have been thinking that it really needs to go beyond intelligence to artificial wisdom. And again, right now we don't have time to discuss that, but we can talk more about that. So Sarah Graham, Colin Depp, Ellen Lee, and Beth Twombly are all part of the IBM team. And this is my last, okay, I'm going to go over that very quickly. But Ellen Lee and I have a paper in press in Harvard Review of Psychiatry, which presents a developmental model of wisdom. So it starts with genes for brain health and longevity, which would impact the childhood behavior and environment, including education as well as presence of grandparents. And again, there is, of course, bidirectional relationship, which should impact the adult behavior and environment, including life experiences and lifestyle, which would affect brain function, the wisdom neurocircuitry and neuroplasticity. So that would explain the wisdom, and the wisdom has benefits for self as well as the society, especially the children and grandchildren, in terms of fertility, longevity, and well-being. And then the circle is repeated with the next generation. So this is the last main slide. So you're talking about wisdom individually, but is there something called societal wisdom? This issue has become important in recent years. So last year we had a whole-day symposium on wisdom here in this same room. And we had speakers from all over the country, including some from abroad. The most important thing was the type of experts that were involved. So we not only had people from psychiatry and psychology, but also from neurology, basic neuroscience, anthropology, including paleoanthropology, philosophy, evolutionary genetics. These are the people who would never be in the same room. And yet they gave talks, and next day we had a closed door session whole day to talk about sort of where we go from here, what do we do, and what impact it has, or relationship it has for the society. As we all know that in the last 2 decades, there have been more changes in the society than there have been in the previous 2,000 years practically, because of globalization and very rapidly evolving technology. These are upending social mores, increasing the stress, In the old days, we had epidemics of cholera and leprosy and polio. The modern epidemics are behavioral epidemics. Epidemic of loneliness, epidemic of opioid abuse, we read about that every day, and suicides. Suicide at all ages, including the younger people. The average longevity has gone down for the first time in decades because of increased suicide. And so we really need to think about a behavioral antidote rather than an antiviral drug. And so suggestion is that wisdom may be such a behavioral antidote or vaccine. And it has implications for educational system as well as healthcare. For example, in medical school, there is a lot of burnout, increased number of suicides among medical students. And that's because we teach these young physicians how to be a better diagnostician and therapist, but not how to take care of themselves. So we don't teach them about how to regulate their emotions, how to be compassionate, including self-compassionate, how to look inwards and understand themselves. That is what is needed. So there is wisdom, and that needs to start right from elementary school level. What does it have to do with psychiatry? A lot. Psychiatry is not specialty focusing on mental illnesses. We are a specialty for mental health. And mental health includes things like resilience, optimism, wisdom. And if we don't talk about that, who will, right? So that's why I call it positive psychiatry. And we need positive psychiatry. One more reason is that right now, psychiatry is partly some stigmatized subspecialty because of the mental stigma about mental illness. But if we talk about these positive traits, I think that will put psychiatry in a different light, and I think it will be great for not only psychiatry, but for the healthcare in general. So this is my absolutely last slide. So from the aging perspective, as I said, there are a bunch of good things that happen with aging. So instead of a silver tsunami with the increased number of older people, that's what it is called, there will be a golden wave of healthy, happy, active, and wise seniors if we help them. So thank you for your attention.
Well, that's lovely work, and what you are studying becomes ever more important to me every day. Yes, as we grow older, these things that you've been following, especially regarding positive aspects of aging, are incredibly important.